Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime Stories from History. Tonight we step into a frontier cabin at the forest's edge, where the fire is low. The wind presses softly against the logs, and something small is already moving behind the flour barrel. You smell wood smoke, damp wool, old earth, and the faint sour trace of grain dust. Outside, the trees stand black against a moonlit sky. Inside, the walls creak as they cool, and tiny claws begin their patient work. You have chosen a life of independence, fresh air, and honest labour. Unfortunately, you have also chosen splinters, smoke in your eyes, and roommates who eat through sacks. To be perfectly realistic, you probably won't survive this with your dignity entirely intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me where you're listening from, along with your local time. It is always comforting to imagine people settling down together across different corners of the world. Now dim the lights and let the frontier night close gently around you. You stand a few paces from the cabin, boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. It is smaller than you imagined. The roof slopes low beneath a scattering of pine needles, and the chimney leans just enough to suggest character or danger, depending on how generous you feel. The building sits near a clearing hacked from the forest, with tree stumps rising like dark knees from the earth. Beyond them, the woodland begins again, dense and watchful. A frontier cabin offers warmth. It offers shelter from rain. More importantly, from a rat's point of view, it offers food that has already been gathered, dried, carried, stacked, and placed in convenient containers. You call this hard-won winter provisioning. The rat calls it excellent service. In many frontier regions, log cabins become common because timber is abundant and sawn boards are difficult or expensive to obtain. A family can fell trees, trim them, notch the ends, and raise a basic structure with help from neighbours. This is one of the familiar facts of frontier settlement. The cabin is practical, but it is rarely airtight. Gaps open between logs, clay chinking cracks, doors warp. Floors, when they exist, do not always meet the walls neatly. Almost. You push open the door, warmth touches your face first, followed by smoke. The single room holds nearly everything that matters. A hearth occupies one wall. A table stands near the centre. Rough stools wait beneath it. Pegs support coats, tools, a lantern, and a pouch of dried herbs. A bed rests in the darkest corner. Barrels and sacks line the walls, because there is nowhere else for them to go. You set down your bundle and listen. At first there is only the low pop of burning wood. Then comes a faint tapping from behind the wall. It stops when you turn your head. Rats are cautious, but they are also curious. They learn routes, remember dangers, and explore new objects. A trap placed in their path may be treated with suspicion for days. A sack left unguarded may be investigated within minutes. Their success depends on noticing changes before you do, which is slightly irritating when you're supposed to be the clever species in the room. One quirky frontier belief claims that rats sometimes carry away shiny buttons, bits of ribbon, or small metal objects simply because they fancy them. Modern observers know that some rodents do collect unusual items, though the motives may be nesting, curiosity, or scent rather than admiration. Still, when a spoon disappears, it is more satisfying to imagine a tiny rat household hosting a very formal dinner. You cross to the hearth. The firelight throws your shadow across the wall, long and unsteady. In the rafters above, something shifts. A pinch of dust falls onto your shoulder. You brush it away and pretend not to notice. Historians still argue whether rats were as constant in every isolated frontier cabin as later stories suggest. Written accounts often mention vermin when infestations become severe, but ordinary annoyance rarely earns a place in diaries. Archaeological traces can reveal gnawed bones, droppings, burrows, and damaged storage. Yet these remains do not always show how often settlers saw the animals or how calmly they accepted them. The earth beneath the cabin is cool and slightly damp. Even where split logs form a floor, air moves through cracks. The wall nearest the forest smells of moss after rain. A barrel of cornmeal gives off a dusty sweetness. Strips of meat hang near the chimney, darkened by smoke. A sack of beans rests on a shelf, though the shelf is hardly high enough to discourage anything that can climb. Outside, the forest offers seeds, roots, insects, eggs, and fallen fruit. Yet wild food is uncertain. Seasons change. Storms come. Predators hunt. Your cabin is different. Here, food remains in one place. Here, warmth continues through winter nights. Here, water sits in buckets. Crumbs fall beneath the table, and grease clings to cooking pots. You have built a shelter for yourself, but without meaning to. You have also built a beacon. The rats do not need an invitation. They follow scent. Grain announces itself through cloth. Salted meat perfumes the rafters. Tallow candles smell faintly edible. Leather contains oils. Soap may attract chewing. Even the paste used in bindings or household repairs can become a meal. The frontier household is full of objects that blur the line between possession and food. You kneel, feeling the floor press cold through your trousers. From the opening comes the smell of dust, fur, and something musky. There's a soft rustle, then silence so complete that you begin to doubt yourself. There are sensible tasks waiting. You should feed the fire, you should check the door latch. You should move the flour away from the wall. You should shake out the blanket before lying down, though perhaps ignorance would be more restful. The cabin settles around you as night deepens. Wind moves through the pines with a long ocean sound. The roof gives a tired groan. Somewhere far away a fox barks. Somewhere much closer, behind the stacked firewood, a rat tests the air. You cannot see it yet. You sense only a presence, a tiny intelligence measuring your habits. It waits to learn when you sleep, where you place food, how quickly you turn toward a noise, and whether the cat you promised yourself will ever arrive. For now you draw the stool nearer the hearth. The warmth reaches your knees, your eyelids begin to grow heavy, but the cabin remains alert. Every crack seems to breathe, every sack seems to whisper, every corner holds the possibility of movement. And as you sit beside the fading fire, listening to the forest lean against your walls, you begin to understand that frontier life is never simply you against the wilderness. The wilderness is already inside, tucked beneath the floorboards, curled behind the barrels, and waiting patiently for the last flame to fall. The last flame sinks lower, and the cabin begins to reveal its true shape through sound. A wall that looked solid by daylight now seems full of whispers. The logs press together in rough horizontal courses, each one cut by hand, each notch shaped with an axe, each seam packed with whatever could be found nearby. Mud, clay, moss, straw, wood chips, even scraps of cloth may fill the spaces. From across the room, the result looks sturdy. Up close, it resembles a puzzle assembled by someone wearing thick gloves in poor weather. You rise from the stool and carry the lamp toward the nearest wall. The light slides over bark scars, axe marks, and dried ridges of chinking. Here and there the filler has shrunk away from the timber. A narrow black line appears between two logs. It is hardly wide enough for your finger, but that is not the standard that matters. A rat does not ask whether an opening looks respectable. It asks whether the skull can pass through, because the rest of the body can often follow. You hold the lamp closer. The flame trembles in a faint current of air. That draft tells you more than you would like. The wall contains a network of possible entrances, some leading straight inside, others opening into hollow spaces. Rain washes clay away, summer heat dries it, and winter frost makes it crack. Log construction becomes a familiar feature of many frontier settlements because it allows people to build with limited tools and locally available timber. A broad axe, and adds, a saw if one can be obtained, and the combined labour of neighbours may be enough to raise walls quickly. The first structure is often more urgent than elegant. Crops need planting, animals need shelter, cold weather approaches whether the chimney is straight or not. You run your palm along a log. The surface feels cold, uneven and slightly sticky where resin remains. Tiny splinters catch your skin. The tree once defended itself with bark and sap. Now it is expected to defend you from rain, wind, wolves, thieves, and rodents. This feels like a great deal of responsibility for one dead pine. Near the corner, 2 logs meet in rough notches. The joint is strong enough to hold the wall, yet it leaves a pocket behind the chinking. A rat can climb the outside using bark ridges, roots, stacked tools, or firewood. Once it reaches the corner, it may squeeze into the joint and travel along the seam. You picture it moving through the wall beside you, separated from your hand by little more than mud and timber. Some settlers peel bark from logs because it can trap moisture and shelter insects. Others leave it when building quickly. One curious old claim says cabins sometimes seem to scratch from within, as though the trees remain alive after cutting. Beetles, mice, and rats make excellent ghosts when hidden inside timber. You move toward the door. It hangs from simple wooden hinges and rests slightly crooked in its frame. At the top, the fit is close. At the bottom, moonlight shows beneath it in a pale silver thread. Dust has gathered along the threshold, crossed by marks so delicate they resemble writing. The door is heavy, but heaviness does not mean precision. Greenwood warps as it dries, hinges stretch, pins loosen, and the threshold wears beneath muddy boots. In winter, cloth or straw blocks the gap. In summer, you remove it, because the room grows hot and smoky. Every improvement solves one problem while inviting another. You crouch and examine the marks. There are prints, perhaps, and a faint line where a tail has dragged through ash. You tell yourself they might belong to a mouse. This is the frontier version of optimism. The floor offers no better comfort. In the poorest or newest cabins, it may be packed earth, swept hard and occasionally covered with sand, straw, or rushes. An earthen floor feels firm beneath your boots, but it remains part of the ground. Burrowing animals need no invitation from the door. They simply approach from below. Where split logs or rough boards create a raised floor, the darkness underneath becomes a sheltered passage. Warm air leaks down, crumbs fall through, and moisture collects. A rat can nest beneath your feet while you congratulate yourself on having a proper floor. You tap one plank with your heel. The hollow answer is immediate. Historians continue to debate how quickly ordinary settlers improved their earliest cabins, and whether later descriptions exaggerate the roughness of first shelters to make frontier achievement appear more heroic. Some families remained in crude buildings for years. Others added floors, ceilings, glass windows, and tighter doors as soon as resources allowed. Wealth, location, climate, trade access, and simple exhaustion all shaped what was possible. You lift the lamp toward the roof. Rafters cross above, dark with soot. Shingles, boards, bark sheets, or thatch may cover the cabin, depending on the region and available materials. The roof must shed rain, resist snow, and survive wind. It does not need to be beautifully sealed to accomplish these things. Small gaps beneath the eaves allow smoke and heat to escape. They also allow animals to enter. A rat climbs astonishingly well. Rough logs are ladders, a leaning tree is a bridge, and the warm chimney offers another route. Beneath the roof, it finds rafters, hanging food, stored herbs, spare cloth, and perhaps your mattress stuffing. You hear a faint scrape above the fireplace. The chimney is built from stone if you're fortunate, or from logs lined with clay if you're less fortunate and more willing to negotiate with fire. Where chimney and wall meet, the structure is difficult to seal. Clay cracks under heat. Stones settle. Wooden framing shifts. The narrow spaces become protected corridors, Warmed by the hearth and perfumed by cooking, you return to the centre of the room. Now every feature seems altered. The wall is not a wall but a landscape. The door is not a barrier but a question. The roof is not a lid but a series of overlapping invitations. Still, you cannot tear everything apart. Daylight belongs to water carrying, wood splitting, planting, hunting, cooking, washing, and mending. A small crack remains untouched because a larger crisis is always waiting. So you do what people often do when surrounded by imperfect choices. You adapt. You press fresh clay into the widest gaps. You wedge a strip of wood beneath the door. You move the sacks farther from the wall. You promise to inspect the roof when morning comes. The lamp flame bends again. From somewhere inside the logs comes a soft, deliberate gnawing. You stand very still, one hand resting on the rough table, and realize that the cabin is not failing. It is behaving exactly as a hurried frontier shelter behaves. It keeps out most of the rain, much of the wind, and nearly all animals larger than a determined cat. The smaller ones, however, have already discovered the architecture. The gnawing stops as suddenly as it began. For several breaths you hear nothing except the fire settling into red coals. The silence feels deliberate, almost polite, as though the creature inside the wall has noticed your attention and decided to wait until you become less interesting. You remain beside the table with the lamp in your hand, listening so carefully that the small flame seems loud. Then a dry scratch travels above your head. You look toward the rafters. Shadows hang between the beams in long dark folds. Smoke has stained the wood nearly black, and every knot resembles an eye. A bundle of herbs sways slightly, though no breeze reaches it. Dust drifts down through the lamplight and settles on your sleeve. This is your first full night beneath the roof, and the cabin is teaching you its evening language. During daylight, each sound belongs to a visible task. An axe strikes timber. A kettle rattles, boots cross the floor, chickens complain in the yard. After dark, sound separates from its source. A tap may come from a cooling log, a branch against the roof, a beetle in the wall, or a rat testing the edge of a wooden bowl. You lower the lamp and prepare the bed. The mattress is a rough tick stuffed with straw, dried grass, corn husks, feathers, or whatever the household can spare. It lies on a wooden frame raised from the floor, which provides some distance from damp earth and crawling insects. Raised beds are common in many early cabins for practical reasons, though they do not create the grand fortress you might hope for. A determined rat can climb a bedpost with very little ceremony. You press one hand against the mattress. The stuffing whispers beneath your palm. Before lying down, you lift the blanket and shake it. A few bits of straw tumble onto the floor. Nothing else appears. This is encouraging, although frontier standards for encouragement are admirably low. You remove your boots but keep them close. Clothing takes time to make, leather is valuable, and leaving either item on the floor presents an opportunity. Rodents chew cloth for nesting material and leather for traces of salt, grease, or sweat. Your boot may be footwear at sunset and a renovation project by dawn. You slide beneath the blanket. The wool feels coarse against your neck. Smoke clings to it along with the faint sense of rain, soil, and human labour. The bed creaks under your weight. Beyond the wall, wind passes through the trees in slow waves. For a little while the room seems peaceful, then comes the first squeak. It is brief and high, somewhere near the hearth. Another answers from behind the barrels. The exchange is so neat that it sounds like a question and reply. You hold your breath. The squeaking stops, but the scratching resumes, followed by the tiny rapid rhythm of claws crossing wood. Rats are largely active during the hours when people hope to sleep. They use darkness to forage while avoiding many predators, and their hearing, smell and touch help them move through spaces where sight is limited. Their whiskers brush walls and objects, allowing them to follow familiar routes with remarkable speed. You, meanwhile, are attempting to navigate the same darkness with a blanket over your head. Something runs along a rafter. You hear it before you see it. Claws strike the beam in a quick series, pause above the table, then continue toward the chimney. A loose chip of bark falls and lands near the stool. The rat itself remains hidden, but its weight produces a soft groan in the dried wood. One odd bit of household lore suggests that a rat running overhead predicts visitors. Perhaps this is true in the broad sense that the visitor is already present, uninvited, and inspecting your ceiling. Other traditions treat unusual rat movement as a warning of weather, fire, illness, or departure. When animals know a building intimately, their sudden changes in behavior can seem mysterious, even when they are responding to smoke, vibration, hunger, or temperature. You turn onto your side. The bed is positioned near the wall to save space and warmth, which places your head unpleasantly close to the hidden corridor between the logs. From within that narrow darkness comes a soft rubbing sound. It moves past your ear, pauses, and continues downward. You imagine whiskers touching clay. You imagine a nose finding a crack. You imagine small paws gripping splintered timber. The details become clearer precisely because you cannot see them. Historians still disagree about how accustomed frontier families became to nocturnal vermin, especially when written memories were recorded many years later. Some accounts describe sleepless irritation and constant defense. Others mention rats casually, as one discomfort among smoke, cold, insects, mud, and crowded living. Memory may sharpen a dramatic night while smoothing away 100 ordinary ones. A heavier thump sounds near the food stores. You sit upright. The lamp has burned low, and reaching it would mean placing bare feet on the floor. You wait. There is a rustle of cloth, then a faint crunch. Something has found a crumb, a kernel, or perhaps an entire corner of a sack. Each tiny bite seems enormous in the quiet. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and stamp once. The cabin erupts. Claws scatter in several directions. One animal darts beneath the table, another scrambles behind the woodpile. Something above you races along the rafters, sending down a shower of soot. For one astonishing second, you understand that the sounds did not belong to a single rat. The darkness holds a whole moving population. Then everything becomes still again. You light the lamp with a coal from the hearth. The flame grows slowly, revealing the familiar table, the barrels, the hanging herbs, and the empty floor. No rat waits in plain view. They have folded themselves back into the cabin, as though they were never there. You examine the nearest sack. A few grains lie beneath it. The hole is small and clean, cut with teeth that work like paired chisels. Rat incisors grow continuously, so gnawing helps keep them worn to useful length. Wood, cloth, bone, leather, and storage containers all become part of that maintenance. You patch the damage with a scrap of thicker fabric and set a pot against it. It is not a permanent solution. Permanent solutions are rare here. It is enough to delay breakfast for your roommates. When you return to bed, you pull the blanket closer around your shoulders. Your body is tired from travel and work, but your hearing remains awake. Every creak becomes a footstep. Every falling speck of dust suggests movement overhead. Gradually, however, exhaustion begins to soften the edges of the room. The scratching no longer sounds like an alarm. It becomes part of the cabin, mixed with the wind, the coals, and the quiet shifting of timber. Your eyes close. Above you, something crosses the rafters once more, slower now, certain that the large creature below is finally learning when to be still. Morning arrives without ceremony. A grey light gathers around the door, turning the room from black to brown, and the first thing you notice is not the cold or the ash or the stiffness in your back. It is the thin trail of meal scattered beneath the sack. The grains form a pale line across the floor. They lead from the patched corner toward the wall, vanish beneath a chest, and reappear near the wood pile. The rats have not merely eaten, They have carried provisions away, one mouthful at a time, with the quiet discipline of workers who never ask permission to join the household. You kneel beside the damaged sack and press the cloth between your fingers. The new hole is smaller than a coin, but enough flour has escaped to dust your hand. A frontier family may depend on this meal for bread, porridge, thickened stew, and dumplings through weeks of poor weather. A little loss seems harmless until it happens every night. Food storage is one of the great daily worries of frontier life. Grain must remain dry, meat must resist spoilage. Seeds for spring planting must survive the winter untouched. Salt, sugar, coffee, and tea may have travelled an immense distance before reaching the cabin, which gives every spoonful a value that modern cupboards rarely communicate. You lift the sack and feel its weight shift. Something moves inside. For one dreadful instant you imagine fur. Then a dry stream of grain slides through the hole and patters onto the floor. You place the sack inside a wooden chest, though the chest itself bears old tooth marks along one corner. Wood feels solid to you. To a rat, it is simply a slower form of packaging. Barrels offer better protection, particularly when they are sound and tightly covered. Flour, cornmeal, beans, dried apples, and salted meat may be stored in them. Yet even a barrel has seams, bungholes, loose lids, and soft edges. If grain spills down the outside, the scent reveals exactly where the feast begins. You wipe the boards carefully with a scrap of cloth. Every crumb matters. Rats can live on surprisingly small amounts, especially when they have access to water and varied scraps. A dropped crust beneath the table, grease on a spoon, a few kernels caught in a crack, all become pieces of a nightly menu. The cabin contains no sealed pantry with smooth shelves and fitted doors. Storage shares the same room as sleeping, cooking, mending, washing, and sometimes the care of animals. Warmth draws people together, and food must stay close enough to protect from cold, damp, theft, and wandering livestock. This creates a convenient arrangement for everyone, including the creatures you would prefer not to feed. You examine the hanging strips of meat near the chimney. Smoke preserves them and gives the surface a dark, dry skin. Suspending food from beams may slow many pests, but rats climb with ease. A rope is a bridge, a peg is a step, a rough wall is a staircase. One curious household practice involves hanging storage baskets from cords and placing smooth metal or glazed pottery barriers above them, rather like umbrellas turned upside down. The idea is that a rat descending the cord meets a surface too wide and slippery to cross. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the rat studies the arrangement, finds another route, and quietly demonstrates why confidence is dangerous. You reach for a strip of smoked meat. The end has been gnawed into a neat curve. There is no dramatic ruin, only the dull insult of discovery. You cut away the damaged portion and inspect the rest. People living far from markets cannot casually discard food. They judge by smell, appearance, necessity, and experience. Standards become flexible when the alternative is hunger. That does not mean contamination is harmless. Rat urine, droppings, fur, and parasites can spoil stores and spread illness. Though frontier households do not understand every pathway involved, they may notice that food exposed to vermin sometimes leads to sickness, but the invisible world of bacteria and viruses remains beyond ordinary explanation. Researchers continue to dispute how much food frontier families typically lost to rodents, because household records rarely count every handful of grain or strip of meat. Severe infestations appear in diaries and later memoirs, while routine losses disappear into silence. Archaeologists may find gnawed seeds, damaged containers, and rodent bones. But these clues cannot reveal the exact frustration of opening a flower chest before breakfast. You move the planting seed to the highest shelf. This is not ordinary food. These kernels are next season's crop waiting in dry sleep. If rats consume them, the damage reaches beyond the present meal and into the coming year. If family can survive a smaller loaf today, it may not survive an empty field tomorrow. The pressure is especially sharp near the end of winter, when supplies are already low. A rat does not understand rationing. It does not care that the last beans must last until the roads open, or that the remaining corn is meant for seed. Hunger has no respect for calendars. You begin reorganizing the room. The meal goes into the strongest chest. Beans enter a covered pot. Dried fruit is wrapped, tied, and suspended from a beam farther from the wall. Salt remains inside a crock with a heavy lid. You sweep beneath the table, then run a stick through every floor crack, pulling out crumbs, nutshells, and one tiny scrap of cloth. Behind the chest, you discover a cache. 3 kernels of corn lie beside a button, a twist of straw, and part of a candle wick. The collection is too small to seem important, yet it proves that a rat has been moving through the room with purpose. It has chosen, carried, and hidden. Somewhere nearby there may be more. You picture tunnels of stolen abundance beneath the floor, beans arranged beside bits of leather, grain packed into dry corners, a crust saved for later. The image is almost admirable until you remember whose labour filled the sacks. Rats often carry food to sheltered places before eating it. This behaviour reduces exposure in open spaces and creates reserves for later. In a cabin, the result may be hidden stores inside walls, beneath bedding, behind barrels, or under floorboards. When such caches spoil, they produce strange smells that seem to come from the building itself. By noon, the room looks cleaner. The barrels are closed, the sacks are raised, the floor has been swept twice. You stand with your hands on your hips, enjoying the fragile satisfaction of order. Then you notice a single bean resting on the shelf. It rolls slowly toward the edge. A whiskered nose appears behind the crock, pauses in the daylight, and vanishes before you can move. The bean drops, strikes the floor, and spins in a small circle. You stare at the empty space. The rat has shown itself for less than a breath, but the message is clear. Your stores are guarded now. They are not safe. Safety requires constant attention, and constant attention is another form of labour, added to hauling water, splitting wood, tending fire, and coaxing food from reluctant soil. As afternoon light warms the cabin, you begin preparing the next meal. Behind you, the barrels stand like a little fortress. Above you, the hanging baskets sway gently. Beneath you, hidden in darkness, your stolen grain waits in someone else's pantry. The bean stops spinning beside your boot, and you bend to pick it up before anything else can claim it. By late afternoon, the cabin is filled with the smells of supper. Smoke curls beneath the rafters. A pot hangs over the hearth, its iron sides dark with soot, while onions soften in a little fat at the bottom. You add water, beans, and a handful of meal, creating something between soup and porridge. Frontier cooking often depends less on written recipes than on memory, availability, and the simple question of what remains edible. The hearth is both kitchen and furnace. It warms the room, dries wet clothing, heats water, preserves meat, and provides light after sunset. It also creates a dangerous confusion of ash, sparks, grease, scraps, and tempting scents. To you, the hearth is the centre of domestic life. To the rats, it's a place where food regularly falls from the sky. You stir the pot with a wooden spoon. Steam touches your face, carrying the comforting smell of beans and smoke. Beneath the table, a crumb from yesterday waits in a crack. Near the chimney, grease has soaked into a scrap of cloth. A thin coating clings to the rim of the skillet. You may think the room looks tidy, but a rat reads it through scent, and the story is one of astonishing generosity. Cooking tools are few and valuable. An iron pot may serve for boiling meat, making stew, heating wash water, rendering fat, and preparing simple medicines. A skillet cooks cakes, eggs, or strips of meat. Wooden bowls, horn spoons, tin cups, and pottery crocks complete the collection. Nothing is designed to be thrown away. Everything is scrubbed, repaired, patched, and used until it becomes almost too fragile to touch. You lift the lid from a crock of fat. The surface inside is pale and smooth, with a faint smell of pork and wood smoke. Rendered fat provides flavour and precious calories. It can also be used in baking, soap making, candle production, and household remedies. Losing it to vermin is not merely annoying, it is the disappearance of stored energy. A soft scrape sounds behind the woodpile. You do not turn at once. You continue stirring, pretending calm. Your grip tightens around the spoon. Another scrape follows, then a quick rustle. The visitor has learned that cooking time brings opportunity. Your attention is fixed on fire, steam, and hot iron. Doors may be open, containers are uncovered, scraps fall. You glance over your shoulder. Nothing moves. A familiar detail of frontier kitchens is the use of a swinging iron crane or simple hooks that allow pots to hang at different heights above the flames. Moving a vessel closer to the fire increases the heat. Pulling it aside slows the cooking. It is a practical system, though it requires careful hands and constant attention. Burns are common, smoke is unavoidable, and every adjustment sends fresh aromas through the room. You draw the pot slightly away from the hottest coals, the fire pops, tossing a spark onto the hearthstone. You stamp it out. In that brief moment, something darts beneath the stool. There it is. The rat is brown, low, and quick, larger than the small field mice you've seen near the clearing. It pauses beside the table leg, its body tense, whiskers trembling. Its dark eye catches the firelight. For one strange second, you study each other across the room. You raise the spoon. The rat disappears beneath the chest. Your attack has achieved nothing except to fling a drop of stew onto the floor. You wipe it up immediately. An unusual piece of kitchen folklore recommends placing strong-smelling herbs near food stores to discourage rodents. Mint, tansy, wormwood, and even crushed evergreen needles appear in household advice across different times and places. The scents may interfere with familiar trails for a while, but hunger usually proves more persuasive than fragrance. A rat confronted with mint beside a crock of fat may simply enjoy a pleasantly scented supper. You scatter a few dried leaves near the chest anyway. Frontier life leaves room for practical measures, inherited wisdom, and desperate optimism to work side by side. The pot begins to thicken. You add salt carefully, because salt is too valuable to pour carelessly. A small quantity improves the meal and helps replace what hard labour draws from the body. Pepper, sugar, and imported spices may be scarce or absent. Flavour comes from smoke, onions, herbs, meat drippings, and appetite. Debate remains among social historians over how monotonous everyday frontier meals truly were. Some surviving accounts emphasize plain cornmeal, pork, beans, and bread. Others reveal gardens, wild greens, berries, game, dairy foods, preserved fruit, and regional variety. Much depends on season, climate, wealth, skill, trade, and luck. A table can look abundant in autumn and painfully empty by early spring. You ladle supper into a wooden bowl and sit near the hearth. The first spoonful is hot enough to sting your tongue. You wait, watching steam rise in thin ribbons. Outside, evening gathers between the trees. Eating alone makes every sound obvious. The spoon touches the bowl. The fire draws air through the chimney. Something shifts behind the wall. A rat squeaks near the shelf, answered by another beneath the floor. You place a cloth over the remaining stew. That will not be enough. Once the pot cools, you must suspend it from a hook or fit a lid tightly over it. Leaving food uncovered overnight guarantees visitors. Even a covered pot may be investigated, pushed, or gnawed around the edges. The smell of grease creates the greatest difficulty. Fat seeps into wood, It clings to cloth. It collects in cracks between hearthstones. Washing requires hot water and time, both produced through labour. You cannot simply turn a tap and rinse the room. Every bucket begins at a spring, stream, or well. Every gallon must be carried. You finish the meal and scrape the bowl clean. The remaining bits go into the pot rather than onto the floor. Bones are saved for broth, tools, dogs, or later use. Ash may be scattered over greasy spots to absorb residue before sweeping. Nothing is casual because waste draws pests and weakens the household. You pour warm water into the bowl and rub it with a cloth. There is no abundant soap for every dish, and harsh lye soap can leave its own taste if used carelessly. Sand, ash, hot water, and vigorous scraping often do much of the work. As you clean the spoon, a faint tug comes from the cloth covering the pot. You turn slowly. The fabric shifts again. A narrow face appears at the rim, whiskers forward, paws gripping the iron edge. The rat has climbed the hearth crane, crossed the hook, and reached the cloth while you stand only a few steps away. You clap your hands. It drops to the floor, lands lightly and races behind the barrels. The cloth falls aside. One corner bears fresh tooth marks. You secure the lid with a flat stone and test it twice. Then you wipe the hearth, sweep beneath the table, hang the spoon, and place the bowl upside down. The room appears orderly again, but the smell of supper lingers in the timber. It has entered the smoke, the cloth, your clothing, and the cracks between stones. Long after the pot is covered and the last crumb removed, the cabin continues announcing that food has been cooked here. You settle near the fire with the uneasy awareness that supper is never entirely over. For you, the meal has ended. For the rats waiting beyond the light, the kitchen is only now becoming available. The kitchen grows quiet, but the smell of supper remains in the room, woven into smoke, wool, timber, and the faint warmth of the hearth. You secure the pot once more, then turn toward the bed with the caution of someone approaching disputed territory. Your blanket waits in the corner. The straw mattress has settled into a shallow hollow shaped by your body, and the wooden frame gives a soft complaint when you sit. After a day of lifting, sweeping, carrying, and guarding food, the bed should feel like a reward. Instead, you study it as though it might contain a legal surprise. You lift the blanket. Nothing moves. You press both hands against the mattress. Straw crackles inside the ticking. A tiny cloud of dust rises into the lamplight and makes your nose itch. You run your fingers along the seam, checking for holes, loose stitches, or fresh chewing. The cloth is coarse but intact. For tonight at least, the rats appear to have respected the mattress. This is not kindness. They simply may not have reached it yet. Beds in frontier cabins vary according to means and circumstance. Some households use wooden bedsteads with rope supports. Others sleep on simple platforms, benches, pallets, or sacks filled with straw. Feather beds are prized where enough feathers can be collected, though they require care and protection. Straw fillings are easier to replace, especially after harvest, but they flatten quickly and can shelter insects. You lie back and feel the mattress shift beneath you. The ropes below sag slightly. A proper rope bed must be tightened from time to time, because stretched cords create an uncomfortable dip. This practical need is sometimes connected with the familiar phrase about sleeping tightly, though language historians question many neat explanations that attach old sayings to household objects. The blanket scratches your chin, you pull it higher. Near your head, the wall releases a quiet tick. Another follows from beneath the bed. You remain still, listening. There is an unpleasant intimacy in sharing sleeping space with animals you cannot see. During the day, you defend the room through movement and noise. At night, you become the motionless object. Your breathing slows. Your hands disappear beneath wool. The cabin belongs to softer feet. A rat may investigate bedding because it offers warmth and nesting material. Loose straw, feathers, wool fibres, and scraps of cloth can be carried away to line a nest. Clothing hung from pegs may be safer than garments left on the floor, but even hanging fabric can be reached from rafters or walls. You remember your boots and pull them closer to the bed. Before putting them on in the morning, you will shake them. This habit is not dramatic, it is simply wise. A boot is dark, enclosed, and scented with salt. Many small creatures find that description appealing. A faint tug touches the lower corner of the blanket. You freeze. The pressure comes again, so slight that it could be the fabric settling. Then the blanket moves toward the floor by the width of a finger. You sit up sharply and pull it back. A grey shape darts beneath the bed. The speed of it leaves you staring at empty boards. Your heart beats faster, partly from surprise and partly from offence. The rat has not attacked. It has merely tested whether your blanket is available for collection. One peculiar household custom advises placing shoes upside down or crossing them beside the bed to prevent vermin from entering. The reasoning varies. Some explanations are practical, since an inverted shoe is harder to crawl into. Others drift into superstition, suggesting that crossed objects confuse harmful creatures or restless spirits. In a cabin full of scratching walls, the distinction between pest control and magic can become wonderfully thin. You turn your boots upside down. There is no need to be proud at this hour. The lamp burns lower, so you hang your clothing from a peg and tuck loose fabric away from the wall. A shirt left draped over a stool could become both ladder and building supply. Stockings are rolled together. A cap is placed inside the chest. The blanket is drawn fully onto the bed, with no corner touching the floor. This careful arrangement feels almost elegant until you notice that you are organising your possessions according to the preferences of rats. Questions remain among historians about how often settlers shared beds with other family members for warmth and economy. Surviving evidence shows that crowded sleeping arrangements were common in many places, especially during travel, winter, illness, or the early stages of settlement. Yet privacy varied widely by household size, wealth, culture, and the number of rooms available. In a one-room cabin, sleeping is rarely private. Parents, children, relatives, visitors, and hired workers may all occupy the same enclosed space. A curtain, hanging blanket, loft, or separate bed corner offers a little division. Sounds travel freely, so do smells, so do rats. You imagine a larger household settling down around you. Children whispering, someone coughing near the fire, a baby waking, an older person turning stiffly beneath a quilt. In such a room, rat noises may blend with human movement. One scratch among many does not always command attention. Tonight, however, you are acutely aware of every sound. Claws pass under the bed frame. The mattress feels suddenly thinner. You lift your feet beneath the blanket and tell yourself this is unnecessary. Rats generally avoid direct contact with alert humans when escape routes are available. They prefer crumbs, stores, and nesting material. You're too large, too warm, and far too complicated to be considered ordinary prey. Still, the blanket remains tightly tucked around your ankles. A soft squeak rises from beneath your head. Another answers near the hearth. Then something begins gnawing wood with patient, regular strokes. The sound has rhythm. Scrape, bite, pause. Scrape, bite, pause. You try to match your breathing to it, which is perhaps the strangest relaxation method the frontier has yet offered. The repetition becomes less alarming as the minutes pass. Your muscles loosen. The mattress supports you despite its lumps. The wool holds your warmth. Outside, the wind has weakened to a low murmur through the branches. Your hand rests near the edge of the bed. A whisker brushes your fingertip. You jerk your arm beneath the blanket and hear claws scatter across the floor. The rat vanishes before the lamp can reveal it. For several moments, sleep seems impossible. Then fatigue returns, heavy and persuasive. You remind yourself that countless people have slept in rough shelters while insects crawled, mice nested, and rats move through the darkness. Rest is not always the absence of disturbance. Sometimes it is the decision that disturbance will have to continue without your supervision. Your eyes close. The room remains busy around you. A scrap of straw is pulled from beneath the mattress. A boot shifts slightly where it rests upside down. Something investigates the bedpost, pauses, and moves away. You drift towards sleep while holding the blanket beneath your chin, wrapped not in perfect safety, but in a temporary agreement between exhaustion and vigilance. By morning, your clothing may be intact, your boots may still be empty, your mattress may retain most of its straw. On the frontier, this counts as a restful night. Morning finds the blanket still tucked beneath your chin and one boot lying several inches from where you left it. You sit up slowly, listening to the quiet room. Pale light enters beneath the door. The fire has collapsed into ash, and the air feels sharp against your face. Somewhere behind the chest, a rat gives one brief squeak, as though acknowledging that you have survived another night together. The time for patience is ending. You pull on your stockings, shake each boot carefully, and begin considering defences. Guarding every crumb has helped, but vigilance alone cannot solve the problem. You need traps, predators, barriers, and perhaps a little frontier nonsense, because desperation has always been an inventive teacher. The simplest trap requires little more than weight, bait, and balance. A flat stone can be propped on a narrow stick with food placed beneath it. When the rat disturbs the support, the stone falls. The idea is ancient, direct, and easy to understand. It is also unreliable when the ground is uneven or the animal approaches from the wrong direction. You carry a stone inside and place it near the wall. The bait presents another problem. Cheese may be famous in later stories, but grain, grease, bread, meat, or nuts are often more tempting. You smear a little fat onto a crust and set it beneath the stone. The smell immediately fills the small corner. Now you must stop yourself from touching it again. Rats notice unfamiliar objects. They may avoid a newly placed trap until it becomes part of the surroundings. Their caution, sometimes called avoidance of new things, allows them to survive in changing environments. This means your clever device may sit untouched while the rats continue eating directly beside it. You step back and admire the trap. It looks less like a triumph of human engineering, and more like an accident waiting for your own fingers. Wooden traps can be built in several forms. Some use falling doors to capture an animal alive. Others employ springs or weighted arms. A skilled craftsperson may shape a narrow box with a baited trigger. The rat enters, touches the mechanism, and finds the opening closed behind it. Metal traps become more available as trade expands, but isolated households often rely on whatever materials are near. Wire is valuable. Iron requires a smith. Purchased devices cost money that might be needed for salt, tools, cloth, or ammunition. You inspect a small wooden box brought from a neighbouring settlement. Its door slides through grooves cut into the sides. A string runs from the door to a tiny peg inside. Bait rests beyond the peg. In theory, the rat pulls, the string loosens, and the door falls. In practice, the door sticks halfway. You rub wax along the groove and try again. This time it falls cleanly. You set the box beside a barrel and place several loose grains near the entrance, creating a path. You feel rather pleased until you remember that the intended visitor has spent several nights studying your habits. An unusual piece of old advice recommends placing a mirror near a rat hole because the animal will supposedly become frightened by its own reflection. Another version claims that rats dislike seeing a rival guarding the entrance. The method has the advantage of sounding intelligent while requiring no difficult construction. It also has the disadvantage of giving a rat a brief opportunity to admire itself before continuing with supper. You do not own a spare mirror, which may be fortunate. Cats offer a more promising defense. Domestic cats have travelled with people across oceans, roads, farms, and settlements. because they control mice and sometimes rats. Ships carry them to protect food stores. Barns welcome them for the same reason. In a cabin, a capable cat can make rodents more cautious, even when it does not catch every intruder. The emphasis belongs on capable. Not every cat is a fierce hunter. Some prefer warm ashes, milk and admiration. A large rat may fight back, and an inexperienced cat may decide that protecting grain is not included in its duties. Still, the smell and movement of a predator can alter rodent behavior. You imagine a lean barn cat stretched beside the hearth, one eye open, tail flicking whenever the wall scratches. It would add another mouth to feed, of course. Frontier solutions often arrive carrying their own expenses. Dogs may kill rats as well, particularly small quick breeds developed for hunting vermin. Yet a dog in a cramped cabin brings noise, mud, fleas, and an enthusiastic interest in the cooking pot. It may catch one rat and overturn 3 bowls in celebration. Some households turn to smoke. If a burrow or hollow space can be located, smoke is directed into it to drive the animals out. The method requires care, especially in a timber building lined with dry straw and cloth. Filling your own cabin with smoke to remove creatures that already live comfortably near the chimney has a certain circular quality. Water provides another approach. A deep bucket is partly filled, then covered with a thin layer of floating material or fitted with a rolling stick baited at the centre. The rat climbs, loses balance, and falls. Such devices can catch several animals, but they must be placed where children, pets, and tired adults will not discover them by accident. You position a bucket near the wall and lay a narrow board against the rim. The arrangement appears suspiciously obvious. Perhaps hunger will overcome caution. Perhaps you will forget it at midnight and create a much larger disturbance. Experts continue to examine how effective household cats actually were against established rat populations in early settlements. Cats clearly killed rodents, but abundant food, hidden nesting spaces, and rapid breeding could allow infestations to continue. A cat might reduce visible activity without removing the deeper colony beneath floors and walls. Poisons exist, though they present serious risks. Arsenic and other toxic substances are known in various periods, but using them near food, children, livestock, and water can cause tragedy. A poisoned rat may also die inside a wall, creating a smell so powerful that you begin reconsidering whether the living version was truly worse. Less dangerous remedies include plaster mixed with meal, strong herbs, ash spread near holes, and bitter substances smeared on surfaces. People pass such recipes through families and neighbourhoods. Some may discourage feeding briefly. Others rely on wishful thinking dressed as practical wisdom. There are even stories of written warnings placed near rat holes, politely ordering the animals to leave. In certain European traditions, pests might be cursed, formally summoned or threatened with punishment. On the frontier, where paper is precious, using it to address rodents suggests either deep faith or complete exhaustion. You settle for wood, stone, bait, and future hopes of a cat. By evening, the cabin has become a small battlefield of careful arrangements. The stone trap waits near the wall. The wooden box rests beside the barrel. The bucket stands beneath the shelf. Loose grain has been removed everywhere except where it serves as bait. You move through the room cautiously, remembering each position. Night gathers. The first rat appears near the hearth, pauses and sniffs. It notices the stone. It notices the box. It notices the bucket. Then it turns away from all three and climbs the opposite wall toward the hanging food. You watch with tired disbelief. The traps are not failures yet, they are simply being judged. As the rat disappears into the rafters, you hear another moving beneath the floor and you understand that this contest will not be decided by one clever device. It will be decided through repetition, adjustment, patience, and the eventual arrival of a cat with a better work ethic than yours. The rat reaches the rafters, pauses above the hanging food, and disappears into shadow just as a child might vanish behind a curtain after doing something forbidden. By morning, the cabin is awake with more human noise than usual. Small feet cross the floor, a wooden cup tips over. Someone complains about the cold. Someone else insists that the scratching in the wall sounded exactly like a tiny person sawing wood. Children growing up in a frontier cabin do not experience rats as an unusual historical problem. They experience them as part of the room. Rats belong to the same daily world as smoke, muddy boots, splinters, bed ropes, kettles, and chores. They are irritating, sometimes frightening, occasionally fascinating, and always capable of turning a quiet moment into sudden confusion. You watch a child kneel beside the wooden box trap. The door remains open. The bait is gone. This discovery produces admiration rather than disappointment. The child studies the empty trap with serious concentration. Small fingers trace the groove where the door should have fallen. Perhaps the peg was too stiff. Perhaps the string caught. Perhaps the rat leaned in from the side and stole the food without entering fully. Children learn by watching adults, but they also learn by experimenting. A trap becomes a lesson in balance, patience, animal behavior, and the limits of confidence. No formal classroom is required. The rat provides the examination, and it grades harshly. Frontier children often take on household work at ages that seem young by modern standards. They carry water, gather kindling, feed poultry, shell corn, watch younger siblings, weed gardens, and help protect food stores. Their tasks depend on strength, family need, season, and local custom. Childhood still contains play, but play occurs beside necessary labor rather than apart from it. You hand the child a small broom. Together you sweep grain dust from beneath the table. The child pushes too quickly, sending a pale cloud into the air. You cough. The child laughs. Somewhere under the floor, a rat retreats from the vibration. Sweeping is more than tidiness. It removes crumbs, seeds, scraps, and nesting material. Children can be taught to check corners, close lids, hang food, and report fresh holes. Yet even the most careful child forgets. A crust disappears into a pocket. Berries roll beneath a stool. A sticky spoon is left on a bench. Rats thrive in the distance between instruction and habit. A younger child may treat them with curiosity. The quick movement, bright eyes, delicate paws, and long tail can seem more interesting than threatening. An older child, after finding a gnawed mitten or spoiled meal, may feel differently. Fear is learned through warnings, experience, and the reactions of adults. You hear a squeal near the chest. A rat has darted across the open floor. One child jumps onto the bed, another grabs a stick. The youngest claps with delight, believing this to be entertainment arranged especially for the morning. The rat slips behind a barrel before the stick comes near it. The child swings anyway and strikes the wall. Dust falls. A spoon drops from a peg. Your defences have now caused more damage than the intruder. There are scattered accounts of children taming young wild animals, including mice and other small creatures, though such stories often become polished with retelling. One odd tradition says that a child who feeds a household mouse may receive good luck, while harming it may bring quarrels or broken dishes. This is charming advice until the fortunate mouse invites 30 relatives. You crouch and explain that rats are not pets. They bite when cornered. They spoil food. They carry fleas. They should not be touched, even when they appear weak or still. The warning must be simple. The danger is real, but frightening children too deeply creates another problem. Night already contains enough sounds. A child convinced that every scratch signals attack may never sleep. Researchers remain divided over how much frontier parents deliberately taught children about disease risks from vermin, since knowledge of infection was incomplete, and household advice varied widely. Families clearly recognized spoiled food, bites, bad smells, and visible parasites as dangerous. What they could not fully understand were the invisible paths by which sickness travelled. You lift the barrel while the older child peers beneath it. There is a nest made from straw, wool fibres, paper scraps, and part of a missing stocking. 3 kernels rest beside it. The child recognizes the cloth immediately. That was mine. The outrage is pure. A rat eating grain is a household nuisance. A rat taking your stocking is personal theft. You use a stick to pull the nest into the open. No young animals remain inside. The material is carried toward the fire and burned. The children watch the edges curl, releasing a bitter smell. This becomes another lesson. Loose cloth must be stored. Bedding must be checked. Food must be covered. Trap locations must be remembered. Bare hands stay away from nests and droppings. Children absorb these rules through repetition, though some lessons arrive only after mistakes. Play continues despite all this. Corncob dolls sit on the chest. Small stones become livestock. A carved animal crosses an imaginary river beneath the table. One child creates a game in which the rat is a villain stealing winter grain. Another child insists the rat should be the clever hero escaping every trap. You suspect the rats would approve of the second version. The boundary between nuisance and entertainment remains thin. A night chase can become a family story. A failed trap inspires laughter. A bold rat carrying away a biscuit may be remembered for years. Humour helps transform helplessness into something manageable. Still, worry stays close beneath the laughter. A child may wake to scratching beside the mattress. A small hand may reach into a dark bin and find movement. A bite, though uncommon, is possible when an animal feels trapped. Food touched by rats can bring illness. Adults must protect children while also depending on them to help maintain the household. You give the older child responsibility for checking the box trap each morning. The task is accepted with solemn pride. The younger one receives a safer duty, gathering visible crumbs into a wooden bowl. The smallest is told not to feed anything that lives in the wall. This last instruction is immediately tested. A piece of bread appears beneath the bed. You ask how it arrived there. The child looks toward the ceiling, considering several explanations, then blames the wind. Frontier parenting requires a flexible relationship with truth. The bread is retrieved. The floor is swept again. The trap is reset with a more sensitive trigger. By midday, the children have moved on to other concerns. There is waters to carry, wood to gather, and a hen missing from the yard. Yet the rats remain part of their awareness. They notice tracks in ash. They recognize gnawing marks. They distinguish the soft movement of a mouse from the heavier rush of a rat. Knowledge settles into them quietly, shaped by repeated encounters. As evening approaches, the cabin fills once more with close warmth and long shadows. The children climb into bed, whispering about the empty trap. One believes the rat is clever. One believes the trap is poorly made. The youngest believes the rat has a name. You lower the lamp and listen as their voices fade. Beneath the floor, a soft scrape answers them. No one screams this time. One child simply pulls the blanket higher and murmurs that the visitor is back. For those raised here, courage does not always mean conquering fear. Sometimes it means recognizing the sound, remembering the rules, and going to sleep anyway. The child's breathing settles, the blankets become still, and the cabin returns to its familiar night rhythm. A scratch beneath the floor, a faint squeak near the hearth, the slow hiss of wind finding its way through the wall. By now you recognize these sounds. Familiarity, however, is not the same as safety. In the morning you discover dark pellets beside the flower chest. A greasy mark follows the base of the wall, where fur has brushed the same route night after night. Near the water bucket, tiny footprints cross a patch of spilled ash. None of these signs seems dramatic. There is no great alarm, no visible cloud of danger, only the quiet evidence of animals moving between food, waste, bedding, and the places where your family eats. You take the broom and pause. Sweeping too quickly sends dust into the air, droppings crumble, dry dirt rises. You do not know the names of every illness that might travel through such material, but experience has taught generations of households that filth and sickness often appear together. People living on the frontier understand disease through a mixture of observation, tradition, religion, local remedies, and whatever medical advice happens to be available. They know that foul water can bring stomach trouble. They know spoiled meat causes suffering. They notice that crowded, dirty rooms often smell of illness. Yet the precise role of microbes remains hidden from ordinary sight. The germ theory of disease does not become widely accepted until the 19th century, and even then knowledge spreads unevenly. In isolated settlements, a physician may be distant, expensive, or entirely absent. Families rely on practical habits long before they understand the science behind them. You dampen a cloth and gather the droppings carefully rather than scattering them. The task feels unpleasant, but ordinary. Frontier survival is full of work that receives no heroic painting. Rats contaminate food in several ways. They walk through waste, then cross tables and shelves. They gnaw open sacks and leave saliva behind. Their urine soaks into grain, cloth, and wood. Fleas travel in their fur. Mites and lice may share their nests. A rat does not need to bite you directly to become part of the chain that makes you ill. You inspect the water bucket. The surface appears clear. A wooden cover rests nearby, where someone forgot to replace it. The thought arrives slowly. A rat can climb the bucket, drink from the rim, or fall inside. Dust and waste can drop from the rafters. A child can dip an unwashed cup into the water. The bucket stands in the same room where boots carry mud, smoke coats the walls, and animals move after dark. You pour the water away. It hurts to waste it. Every drop must be fetched again, and the path to the spring is muddy. Still, thirst is easier to manage than a household weakened by vomiting, fever, or severe stomach pain. Medical historians continue to question how often rodent contamination caused illnesses that frontier families blamed on bad air, weather, divine judgment, or mysterious seasonal weakness. Written descriptions rarely provide enough detail for a firm diagnosis. A fever may have come from insects, water, food, respiratory infection, or several causes at once. You carry the bucket outside and rinse it with fresh water. The morning air smells of wet bark and cold soil. Near the cabin wall you notice a narrow burrow opening beneath the lowest log. A few pale insects move in the fur caught at its edge. Fleas are small enough to escape attention until they bite. They leave itchy red marks, disturb sleep, and sometimes carry far more serious threats. The most famous connection between rats, fleas, and human disease appears in outbreaks of plague, although the exact roles of different rodent species, human fleas, lice, and environmental conditions remain subjects of continuing study. Your frontier cabin may be far from a great medieval city, but distance does not make parasites sentimental. Wherever humans store food and create warm shelter, other living things gather. You rub a niche near your ankle. Perhaps it is a flea. Perhaps it is dry skin. Perhaps thinking about fleas has created the most powerful itch of all. One curious remedy recommends placing certain fragrant plants in bedding to repel insects. Pennyroyal, mint, southernwood, and cedar appear in household traditions. Some scents may discourage pests for a time, while others merely make an infested mattress smell more respectable. People also shake bedding outdoors, expose it to sunlight, boil washable cloth, or dust sleeping areas with ash. You carry the blankets outside and beat them against a line. Dust bursts into the daylight. Straw fragments fall. A tiny insect vanishes before you can identify it. The children watch from a safe distance, suddenly very interested in a task they would normally avoid. Back inside, you inspect the food stores again. A sack of meal has a damp patch near the bottom. You smell it and recoil. The odour is sour and musky. This is where necessity and caution begin their argument. Throwing away the whole sack may leave too little food. Keeping it may bring illness. You spread the meal onto a clean cloth and separate the visibly spoiled portion. You know this is not perfect protection. You also know hunger is not an abstract possibility. Household decisions are rarely simple when supplies are limited. Modern advice can assume access to replacement food, clean containers, medical care, and safe disposal. You have none of these in abundance. You weigh risk against need with incomplete knowledge and no guarantee that either choice is kind. A child coughs near the hearth. You turn immediately. It is only smoke. The chimney is drawing poorly this morning, and a grey layer hangs beneath the roof. Still, every cough now sounds like a warning. Fever, rash, weakness, swollen glands, stomach pain, and breathing trouble can arrive without explanation. By the time symptoms become severe, help may be hours or days away. You clean the table with hot water. You scrub the cups. You cover the bucket. You seal the meal inside the strongest chest and move it away from the wall. These acts are small, repetitive, and imperfect, but they reduce risk. A rat runs across the yard beyond the open door. In daylight, it looks less like a mysterious creature of the walls and more like an animal following opportunity. It pauses near the discarded water, drinks from a shallow depression, and disappears beneath the cabin. You watch it go. The rat is not plotting disease. It is not malicious. It searches for warmth, food, water, and shelter, exactly as you do. The danger comes from proximity, from shared spaces, and from invisible passengers moving between species. By evening, the bedding hangs fresh near the fire. The water bucket remains covered. The floor has been dampened and cleaned. Herbs lie beneath the mattress, releasing a sharp green scent. The cabin feels healthier because it smells different. Whether it truly is healthier remains uncertain. You sit near the hearth and notice another itch at your wrist. You resist scratching. Around you, the family eats from cleaned bowls while the walls release their soft nocturnal sounds. Life here depends on what you can see, but survival is often shaped by what you cannot. A flea hidden in fur, a stain inside grain, a sickness travelling through water, a danger too small for the eye, moving quietly through the same warm room where you sleep. The herbs beneath the mattress release their sharp scent for several days, but the cold arrives before you can decide whether they have helped. It begins with a thin white edge along the water bucket. Then the mud stiffens. Frost remains in the shadows after sunrise and the cabin door resists because damp wood has swollen overnight. Winter advances through small restrictions. The path to the spring becomes slick. Daylight shortens. Firewood disappears faster. Clothing stays damp near the hearth. Windows remain shuttered against the wind. Outside, food grows scarce for every creature. Seeds vanish beneath snow. Insects retreat into bark and soil. Water hardens at stream edges. A rat that once moved between field, barn, woodpile, and cabin now has fewer reasons to leave the warmth beneath your floor. You wake before dawn to a chorus of scratching. The sounds come from several directions. One animal moves behind the wall, another gnaws near the chest. Something races across the rafters. The population seems to have doubled, although it may simply have concentrated indoors. You pull the blanket around your shoulders and step onto a floor cold enough to sting your feet through wool stockings. The hearth is nearly dead. You kneel and blow upon the coals, feeding them dry bark and thin sticks. Smoke curls into your face before the flame catches. Behind you, a rat darts from beneath the table toward the woodpile, unwilling to surrender the warm room even while you are awake. Frontier households prepare months before hard frost. Families gather fuel, preserve meat, dry fruit, store roots, grind grain, repair roofs, and seal cracks. Survival depends on carrying warmer season abundance into winter. The problem is that every stored item also attracts pests. You inspect the barrels. The lids remain in place, but tooth marks have deepened along one rim. A sack suspended from the ceiling has been reached from the rafters. The wooden chest carries a new groove where repeated gnawing has softened the corner. Cold increases the value of every lost mouthful. In summer, cornmeal may be replaced. In winter, roads become difficult, rivers freeze, and travel turns dangerous. The stores must last until spring, whether rats understand this or not. They do not. You ration breakfast carefully. A small cake of meal cooks on the skillet while water heats beside it. The children watch the food with unusual silence. Everyone understands that the barrel is lower than it was a month ago. Beneath the shelf, something crunches. You strike the wall with the handle of the broom. The sound stops. An old winter superstition claims that rats carrying scraps upward into walls or rafters predict deep snow, while rats nesting closer to the ground suggest a mild season. The logic sounds neat, though rodents choose nests for warmth, dryness, safety, and access rather than human forecasting. Even so, you watch where they carry the straw. The first heavy snow arrives that afternoon. It presses against the lower logs and softens every outdoor sound. The forest becomes pale and still. Branches bend beneath the weight. The yard disappears beneath a smooth surface broken only by tracks leading from the woodpile. Inside, the cabin becomes more crowded. Wet coats hang near the fire. Boots line the wall. Children remain indoors longer. Food, bedding, tools, and people compete for space. Sweeping becomes harder. Crumbs become easier to miss. Moisture gathers on cold surfaces. A fire must burn almost constantly. This draws rats nearer to the chimney, beneath the hearthstones, and into the walls warmed by smoke. You hear them settling into pockets of heat that your own hands cannot reach. Researchers have not reached full agreement on whether winter infestations came from new rodents entering cabins or existing colonies becoming more visible around concentrated food. Climate, building type, species, and nearby barns all matter. What feels like an invasion may be a hidden population stepping into the open. You notice this change after dark. A rat crosses the floor while the family is still awake. Another appears near the bucket before the lamp is lowered. The animals remain cautious, but hunger makes them bolder. Their usual paths are blocked by snow, cold, and predators. The cabin offers warmth worth risking your presence. You reset the traps. The stone trap snaps during the night, but when you approach in the morning, the bait is gone and the stone rests harmlessly on its side. The box trap catches only a tuft of fur. The bucket trap remains untouched except for tiny prints along the board. Even the hoped-for cat, recently borrowed from a neighbour, spends much of the day curled beside the hearth. It is a broad-faced animal with one torn ear, and the confidence of a creature accustomed to being fed. At night it watches the wall with narrowed eyes. Once it springs beneath the table and emerges with nothing but dust on its whiskers. The children praise it anyway. The cat accepts this admiration as payment. As the cold deepens, water becomes difficult. Buckets freeze near the door. Melting snow consumes fuel and yields less water than expected. Cleaning remains necessary just when energy is scarce. You wipe shelves with warm water, then dry them quickly to prevent dampness. You shake bedding beside the hearth. You inspect clothing for chewed corners. The tasks repeat so often that they lose any sense of completion. At night, everyone sleeps closer together. Bodies share warmth. Blankets overlap. The cat claims the safest place near the ashes. Beyond the circle of firelight, rats move through walls lined with stolen straw and cloth. The cabin smells of smoke, wet wool, cooked grain, animal fur, and winter breath. Frost forms around the weakest gaps in the logs. Each white line marks a place where cold enters and warmth escapes. You press fresh clay into one crack, then another. From inside the wall comes a faint squeal of protest. You pause, fingers cold and muddy, aware that sealing the opening may trap a rat inside rather than keep one out. It may search for another exit, perhaps into the room. Frontier repairs often contain this kind of hidden joke. The storm continues for 2 days. Snow piles against the door, firewood shrinks, the meal barrel lowers, the scratching never fully stops. Yet the household endures through routine. You feed the fire, you cover the food, you count the stores, you sweep the floor, you listen for traps, you wake when something moves too close to the bed. Winter has reduced the world to a single warm room, and every living thing nearby seems determined to enter it. Outside lies silence, hunger, and cold. Inside lies smoke, food, crowded blankets, and the steady rustle of creatures that have made the same decision you have. Stay near the fire. Wait for spring. Survive the night. The waiting ends slowly. At first, winter merely loosens its grip. Snow sinks around the cabin walls. Water begins tapping from the eaves. The path to the spring turns from ice to mud, and the forest releases the smell of wet bark, old leaves, and thawing soil. Then one morning sunlight enters through the open door and reveals the cabin with uncomfortable honesty. Dust hangs above the floor, soot darkens the rafters, straw protrudes from beneath the bed. The walls carry greasy trails where rats have followed the same paths through the cold months. In the clearer light, every corner seems to contain evidence. Spring cleaning is not a decorative ritual here. It's a necessary opening of the household after months of smoke, crowding, damp clothing, stored food, and sealed shutters. Bedding must be aired, floors must be scraped or swept, containers must be emptied and inspected. Walls need fresh clay. Anything that has remained untouched through winter may now contain a nest. You begin with the bed. The blanket goes outside first, followed by sheets, clothing, and the straw mattress. The children carry smaller items into the yard, where sunlight falls across them. The cat follows and sits in the warmest patch, contributing nothing except supervision. You untie the mattress seam and pull out the old stuffing. The smell arrives before the contents are fully exposed. Dust, stale sweat, dried grass, and animal musk rise together. The straw has broken into short pieces after months beneath sleeping bodies. Near one corner, several neat tunnels pass through the filling. A handful of grey fur clings to the cloth. You spread the straw over the ground and use a stick to turn it. Beetles scatter. Fleas vanish into the grass. A small collection of corn husks appears, followed by thread, wool, and part of a paper label that disappeared during winter. The rats have been furnishing their home from yores. Replacing straw fillings in spring is a familiar practice in many rural households. Fresh material improves comfort and removes some insects, dirt, and dampness gathered through the colder season. Feather bedding may also be aired, eaten, and inspected, although feathers are too valuable to discard casually. You hang the empty ticking over a line and beat it with a smooth branch. Dust blooms into the sunlight. Each strike produces a soft report that echoes across the clearing. Inside, the room looks larger without the bed. You shift the frame away from the wall. Beneath it lies a scatter of grain, nutshells, candle scraps, and tiny bones. A strip of cloth has been pulled into a crack between the floor and the lowest log. You tug gently. More cloth follows. Then a compact nest rolls into view, woven from straw, wool fibres, feathers, and the missing corner of a child's mitten. It is round, soft, and carefully made. For a moment you admire the skill. The materials have been chosen and layered with more attention than some frontier roofs receive. A peculiar old belief holds that finding a nest made mostly from red thread predicts household quarrels, while white fibres suggest peace. The rats, having used every colour available, seem unwilling to offer a clear forecast. You lift the nest with a shovel and carry it outside. Next comes the chest. It takes 2 people to move it. The boards scrape across the floor, exposing a dark patch that has not seen daylight since autumn. Droppings gather along the wall. Several beans lie beneath a curl of bark. A wooden spoon, missing for weeks, rests among shredded paper. The children accuse the rats of stealing it. You point out that a rat could not easily carry such a spoon through the wall. The children remain unconvinced. The rats have developed a reputation broad enough to include every unexplained loss in the cabin. You scrape the floor with a flat blade. Where the surface is packed earth, the upper layer can be loosened and removed. Fresh sand or clean soil may be spread afterward. Where planks exist, you pry one upward to inspect the hollow beneath. Warm, sour air escapes. The space contains more than you expected. There are several nests, stores of grain, pieces of leather, dried fruit, feathers, and fragments of cloth. Some material is fresh, some has decayed into a dark mass. The hidden pantry explains the strange smell that appeared whenever the hearth warmed the floor. Researchers continue to differ over how much archaeological evidence from cabin sites represents active household infestation rather than rodents entering abandoned buildings later. Gnawed seeds, burrows, nesting material, and small bones can survive after people leave. Establishing when each trace appeared requires careful interpretation. For you, there is no uncertainty. These rats were present through winter. You heard them. You watched them. You are now holding the reins of their private storeroom. The cleaning becomes demolition. More boards come up. Crates are emptied. Barrels roll into the yard. Every object reveals a shadow beneath it, and every shadow contains crumbs. You discover that sweeping the visible room all winter did little to reach the deeper accumulation. Near the chimney, soot has mixed with grease into a sticky black layer. You scrub it with hot water and ash. The smell is harsh, and your arms ache. Cleaning a frontier cabin requires water carried by hand, fuel cut by hand, soap made by hand, and patience supplied from some mysterious reserve. The walls receive attention next. Old chinking crumbles beneath your fingers. You remove loose pieces and search each cavity before pressing in fresh clay. In one gap you find a tunnel polished smooth by fur. In another, a nest holds several pale young rats. You stop. This is the part of household control that tidy advice rarely describes. The animals are pests, but they're also warm, breathing creatures. The young lie blind and helpless in stolen wool. You carry the nest far from the cabin and leave it near the tree line. Whether the mother finds it, whether a fox does, or whether the cold night settles, the matter is beyond your control. Back inside, you seal the opening. By afternoon, the cabin has been emptied, exposed, beaten, scrubbed, and rearranged. Sunlight reaches parts of the floor that remained dark all winter. Fresh straw fills the mattress. Clean cloth covers the table. Food containers stand away from the walls. The room smells of clay, soap, sun-warmed wool, and damp wood. It feels new. Then the cat crouches beside the hearth. Its ears turn forward. Its tail becomes still. From beneath a floorboard comes one faint scratch. You close your eyes for a moment. Spring cleaning has removed nests, spoiled grain, fleas, dust, and months of hidden activity. It has reduced the population and exposed their roots. It has not changed the nature of the cabin or the forest beyond it. You place a trap near the sound. Outside, the cleaned bedding moves gently in the breeze. Water drips from the roof. Birds call from branches newly tipped with green. Inside, beneath fresh straw and repaired walls, one surviving rat begins searching for a quieter corner. The surviving rat beneath the floorboard does not remain alone for long. Beyond the cabin, the clearing is warming. Mud gathers around the barn door. Chickens scratch through damp straw. A cow shifts inside the lean shelter, breathing clouds into the cool morning air. The world seems larger after the close months of winter, but the problem has simply spread into new buildings. You follow the cat across the yard. It moves with sudden purpose, tail low, nose angled toward the barn. The structure is rougher than at the cabin, built for animals rather than comfort. Its walls admit light through gaps. The roof leaks near one corner. Feed dust settles over every beam and ledge. To a rat, this is not poor construction. It is abundance with ventilation. The barn stores grain, hay, harness, tools, and sometimes root crops. Livestock remain nearby through darkness, providing warmth, spilled feed, water, and shelter from predators. Even when the cabin is swept and sealed, the barn can sustain a large rodent population only a short run away. You lift the lid of the feed bin. A shallow hollow marks the surface of the grain. Tiny tracks cross it. Along the inner edge, a tunnel descends where rats have pushed beneath the kernels, feeding from below while leaving the top almost undisturbed. This is a useful trick from their point of view. You may glance into the bin and believe little has changed. Only when you scoop feed do hidden cavities collapse, revealing how much has vanished. Barns become central to many settled frontier farms as families acquire livestock and produce more than a cabin can hold. Their exact forms vary by climate, region, cultural tradition, and available timber. Some combine animal stalls and storage under one roof. Others separate hay, grain, and livestock into smaller structures. Whatever the design, stored feed creates a powerful attraction for rodents. You push the scoop deeper. A rat bursts from the grain. It leaps over the rim, lands against your sleeve, and drops to the floor before racing beneath a stack of boards. You stumble backward, scattering feed across the aisle. The cow watches without sympathy. The cat springs after the rat, vanishes behind the boards, and emerges moments later looking offended. A cobweb hangs from one ear. The rat is gone. You sweep the spilled grain into a bucket, though dirt and straw have mixed with it. Nothing is wasted easily. Feed that seems unfit for people may still go to chickens or pigs, provided it is not badly spoiled. The chicken coop presents a different challenge. Hens scatter grain when they eat. Seeds fall beneath roosts into bedding and through cracks. Eggs provide another temptation. Rats may consume broken eggs, steal small chicks, or frighten birds at night. A hen that refuses to settle may be reacting to movement beneath the floor. You crouch beside the nesting boxes. One egg bears a small puncture. Another is missing entirely. There is an old rural tale that rats sometimes roll eggs away by having one animal hold the egg while another pulls it by the tail. The image is wonderfully organised, like a tiny farm crew with a transport plan. Naturalists generally regard such stories with doubt, though rats can certainly break, eat, and move eggs in less theatrical ways. You picture two rats coordinating beneath the moonlight and decide the truth is probably less charming. The smokehouse stands farther from the cabin, its walls darkened by years of curing meat. Inside hang hams, strips of pork and sausages, all suspended above the floor. Smoke, salt, and dryness slow decay, but none of them makes meat invisible. The lowest piece bears fresh tooth marks. You raise it higher and inspect the hanging cords. One has been partly chewed. If it breaks, the meat will fall directly onto the floor, turning a difficult meal into an effortless one. Questions persist among agricultural historians about whether rodent losses in barns were usually accepted as a routine expense, or remembered mainly when they threatened winter survival. Farm records may count sacks purchased and animals fed, yet they seldom record every handful carried away by vermin. The true cost hides inside ordinary shortages. You examine the barn walls. Near the ground, burrows enter beneath the foundation logs. Above, ladders, stacked wood, and harness pegs create routes to lofts. Hay provides concealment and nesting material. A rat can cross the building without touching open ground. The loft is warm and dusty. Sunlight cuts through the boards in narrow golden bars. You climb the ladder and hear movement inside the hay before your head reaches the top. Several tunnels run through the stack. You pull aside a bundle and uncover a hidden store of corn, dried peas, cloth scraps, and bits of animal feed. The cache resembles the one beneath the cabin floor, only larger. Here, fewer people disturb it. The barn offers privacy, the cabin cannot. Livestock complicate every defense. Poison may harm chickens, dogs, cats, or valuable animals. Traps must be placed where hooves and curious noses cannot reach them. Sealing every opening is nearly impossible when doors open throughout the day, and walls must allow air to circulate. You place traps behind feed bins and inside narrow wooden tunnels designed to exclude larger animals. Grain is transferred into tighter barrels. Loose sacks are raised on platforms. Spilled feed is swept each evening. The work adds another layer to the farm routine. You milk, feed, water, clean, repair, gather eggs, and now inspect for rats. Each task connects to the others. A broken bin creates spilled grain. Spilled grain supports more rodents. More rodents damage harness, frighten poultry, and contaminate feed. Even the leather straps hanging from pegs show chewing. Sweat and oil attract gnawing, while soft leather provides useful nesting scraps. A damaged harness may fail during hauling, turning a small bite mark into a serious danger. You move the tack into a chest. From the stable stall comes a sudden stamp. The horse has sensed movement near its feed trough. You approach calmly, speaking in a low voice. Beneath the trough, straw shifts. A rat emerges, races along the wall, and disappears into the hay. The horse snorts and pulls against the rope. Animals hear and smell much that you miss. A restless horse, uneasy chickens, or a dog staring at a floorboard may reveal activity before you see it. The farm itself becomes a network of warnings. By evening you've inspected the barn, coop, stable, and smokehouse. Everywhere you find the same pattern. Food gathered through human labor creates concentrated plenty. Buildings create shelter. Animals create warmth. Rats connect them all. You walk back toward the cabin with the cat following several steps behind. The setting sun turns the muddy yard copper. Chickens settle onto their roosts. The cow chews quietly inside the barn. For a moment the farm seems peaceful. Then a rat crosses from the smokehouse to the woodpile. Another slips beneath the coop and something rustles in the hayloft overhead. The infestation is not contained within one room. It moves through the entire homestead, following grain, warmth, and shadow, making every useful building part of the same hidden territory. The rat vanishes beneath the coop, and by the following afternoon news of it has somehow reached the nearest neighbours. Frontier settlements may be scattered, but information travels quickly when it concerns weather, illness, wandering livestock, failed crops, or creatures eating everyone's winter stores. A person walking the path between cabins carries more than a borrowed tool. They carry warnings, rumours, remedies, and the quiet reassurance that your troubles are not uniquely yours. You hear voices before the visitors appear. Two neighbours emerge from the trees, one carrying a wooden trap, the other holding a sack that moves slightly at the bottom. Their boots are coated with mud, and their coats smell of smoke from another hearth. The first neighbour looks toward your barn and nods with grave understanding. Rats? You answer that there may be a few. This is frontier modesty. A roof can be leaking onto the bed, and you will describe the cabin as slightly damp. The second neighbour opens the sack. A lean grey cat pushes its head into the light, blinks at everyone, and attempts to climb back inside. It has narrow shoulders, a torn ear, and none of the comfortable dignity of the cat already sleeping near your fire. "This one hunts," the neighbour says. Your own cat, hearing this insult from inside the cabin, does not bother to respond. Communities often depend on shared labour and borrowed resources. Neighbours gather to raise barns, harvest crops, clear roads, care for the sick, and rebuild after storms or fires. Tools pass from household to household because few families can afford every object they need. A trap, a breeding cat, or a sack of sound grain may be loaned just as readily as an axe or wagon. You carry the visitors inside. The cabin suddenly feels smaller. Coats hang from pegs. Mud gathers near the door. A pot of water goes over the fire because hospitality remains important even when supplies are tight. You offer a warm drink made from whatever is available, and everyone settles around the table to discuss rats, with the seriousness usually reserved for weather and politics. The neighbours compare signs. One household has gnawing beneath the grain chest. Another hears movement inside the chimney wall. Someone farther down the trail claims to have trapped 12 rats in a week. This number is repeated with admiration, suspicion, and perhaps a little envy. Frontier storytelling is rarely damaged by precise counting. You describe the tunnels in the barn, the missing egg, and the nest beneath the mattress. The visitors nod. They have seen worse, naturally. One neighbour recalls a rat carrying away a candle while it was still warm. Another tells of waking to find a loaf dragged halfway through a wall crack. A third story, borrowed from someone not present, involves a rat opening a cupboard latch with its teeth. Nobody believes the final detail completely. Nobody rejects it either. A peculiar custom in some rural communities involves singeing a captured rat and releasing it. Supposedly so, the smell frightens the rest of the colony away. The practice is cruel, unreliable, and likely to produce one furious rat rather than an orderly evacuation. Still, it survives in stories because people prefer a dramatic remedy when ordinary methods fail. Your visitors offer less theatrical suggestions. The first trap is a narrow wooden tunnel with a falling door. Its trigger is more sensitive than yours. The neighbour demonstrates how to rub the mechanism with grain dust so it smells familiar. Human scent, they explain, may make cautious rats hesitate. The advice is delivered with confidence. Whether the rats care as much about your hands as the neighbour claims is another matter, but you listen carefully. The second neighbour recommends leaving traps unset for several nights with bait inside. Once the animals feed without harm, the mechanisms can be activated. This requires patience, which no one possesses in abundance after losing food, but it follows the rat's caution rather than fighting it. The two cats meet near the hearth. Your broad-faced resident rises slowly. The grey newcomer steps from the sack and becomes very still. Their eyes narrow, tails flick. For several long seconds, the cabin holds the possibility of a much louder problem. Then the newcomer notices movement behind the chest. It springs. There is a thump, a squeal, and a crash as a wooden cup falls from the table. The grey cat emerges with a rat in its jaws. The neighbours look delighted. Your own cat begins washing one paw, as though hunting in front of guests would be vulgar. Discussion among historians continues over how much mutual aid shaped daily survival in scattered frontier communities. Popular stories often celebrate isolated families succeeding through individual toughness. Yet letters, court records, church accounts, and local traditions reveal constant borrowing, visiting, trading, and collective work. Independence often rested upon a wide network of obligation. You feel that network around the table now. One neighbour offers spare wire for traps. Another promises a stronger barrel lid. In return, you agree to help repair a roof after the next clear day. Nothing is entirely free, but payment does not always arrive in money. Advice circulates with the same flexibility. Keep the grain away from walls. Do not leave water uncovered. Move the traps often. Never move the traps. Use fat as bait. Use roasted corn. Borrow a dog. Do not borrow a dog unless you enjoy chaos. Every household possesses one method that always works, except during the times it does not. You begin to notice a quiet competition beneath the sympathy. One neighbour insists their cabin has almost no rats because they sweep nightly. Another says rats avoid their place because the walls are tightly sealed. The first neighbour raises an eyebrow. Everyone knows the second cabin has a gap beneath the door, large enough to admit a boot. Nobody says this aloud. Reputation matters. A heavy infestation can imply poor housekeeping, weak storage, or carelessness, even when the true causes are building design, nearby fields, weather, and simple bad luck. People minimize their own problem while describing everyone else's in vivid detail. You're advised not to mention the nest beneath your mattress when visiting the next settlement. It might grow into a story about rats carrying away the entire bed. As evening approaches, the visitors prepare to leave. The borrowed trap remains beside the grain chest. The grey cat stays as well, though the neighbour expects it returned after several nights. You wrap a small portion of dried herbs in cloth as a gift. The exchange feels modest, but it seals the favour. Outside, the path glows beneath the lowering sun. Your neighbours disappear between the trees, carrying news of your infestation toward other cabins. By tomorrow, someone will hear that your barn is overrun. By next week, the rats may be described as large enough to chase the cat. Inside, the newcomer crouches near the wall. Your own cat watches from the hearth with injured pride. The wooden trap waits beside the barrel, baited but unset. Fresh advice fills your mind, some useful, some doubtful, all offered generously. You're still responsible for the cabin. You must still sweep, seal, store, and listen. Yet the problem no longer feels confined to your private darkness. Across the settlement, other people hear the same scratching. They lose the same grain. They invent the same clever solutions. And when one method works, or seems to work, the story travels from fire to fire, carrying hope through the forest far faster than any rat can run. The story of the enormous rat reaches the next cabin before sunset, and by the time it returns to you, the animal has apparently learned to open doors, steal spoons, and glare at respectable people with deliberate malice. You listen beside the hearth while a visitor repeats the tale with complete confidence. This is how folklore grows. A real sound begins beneath the floor. A missing crust provides evidence. Fear adds shape. Memory adds colour. By the third telling, the rat is no longer merely hungry. It has intentions. In a world where darkness begins early, and many noises have no visible source, ordinary animals easily gather extraordinary meanings. Rats move behind walls, beneath beds, and inside roofs. They appear without warning and vanish through openings too small to understand. They know the hidden parts of the house better than the people who built it. That alone makes them suitable creatures for superstition. You sit close to the fire while the wind presses lightly against the cabin. Beneath your feet, one soft scratch passes from left to right. The visitor pauses mid-sentence. Neither of you comments on it. Across different cultures, rats and mice have carried many symbolic meanings. They may represent hunger, destruction, cleverness, fertility, secrecy, disease, survival, or unwanted change. Such beliefs travel with settlers through stories, family customs, religious teachings, printed almanacs, and memories brought from distant homes. On the frontier, these ideas mix with local experience. A rat leaving a building may be treated as a warning that fire, collapse, flood, or misfortune is approaching. The belief makes a certain practical sense. Animals sometimes react to smoke, vibration, rising water, or structural disturbance before people notice the cause. Yet once the pattern becomes a story, every departing rat can seem like a messenger. You remember seeing several animals run from the barn before the last storm. Was that foresight? Or did someone spill grain near the woodpile? Folklore rarely troubles itself with such dull alternatives. Another saying claims that sudden silence among household rats signals a coming death. A room that usually scratches all night can feel unnaturally still when the creatures change their routes. If illness already weighs on the household, silence becomes easy to interpret as an omen. You glance toward the bed. The cabin is not silent tonight. This may be reassuring, which is a sentence you never expected to think. One unusual tradition advises speaking directly to rats in a calm voice and asking them to leave. The household names a better place nearby, perhaps an empty shed or distant field, and explains that remaining in the cabin will bring danger. Similar customs appear in several regions, suggesting that people sometimes treat pests as beings capable of negotiation. You imagine kneeling beside the floorboard and offering reasonable terms. The barn has grain, the woodpile has shelter, the cabin is no longer available. The rat, having ignored traps, cats, stones, smoke, herbs, and human outrage, would probably listen politely and continue chewing. Still, speech can comfort the speaker even when it does not persuade the listener. Giving words to fear makes it feel smaller. Naming a threat creates the sense that it can be addressed. Settlers also rely on charms. A sprig of a certain herb may be tucked near a rat hole. A marked piece of wood may be placed beneath a chest. Salt may be scattered at an entrance. A spoken verse may accompany the setting of a trap. These actions blend religion, inherited custom, domestic ritual, and practical pest control. Some measures have ordinary value beneath their symbolic meaning. Strong herbs alter scent trails, salt reveals footprints, ash shows where animals travel. A wooden plug closes a gap whether or not a blessing is spoken over it. The belief and the method can coexist. Cultural historians remain uncertain about how seriously frontier families accepted every superstition they repeated. A person might tell an omen as entertainment, follow a charm from habit, and still build a trap the next morning. Belief is not always a simple choice between complete faith and total disbelief. You understand this as the lamp burns low. You know the scratching beneath the floor comes from claws and teeth. You know the wall contains tunnels, not spirits. Yet when a rat squeals inside the chimney during a storm, the sound travels through the cabin like a human cry. Knowledge does not always prevent imagination. Children are especially skilled at turning hidden animals into characters. One rat becomes the old thief beneath the chest. Another becomes the pale ghost of the flour barrel. A third is blamed for every missing button, broken cup, and unexplained noise. Adults pretend not to encourage such stories. Then they add details. The old thief cannot cross a line of salt. The flour ghost appears before snow. The chimney rat scratches 3 times before visitors arrive. Soon the cabin has its own private mythology, built from repeated sounds and shared unease. Printed almanacs, religious pamphlets, household manuals and oral traditions often carry advice about omens, animals, weather and remedies. Literacy varies, and books may be scarce, so a single printed page can influence many households as it passes from hand to hand. Yet spoken knowledge remains equally powerful. A neighbour remembers what a grandmother said. A traveller repeats what worked in another settlement. A child hears the tale and preserves it for decades. By the time anyone asks where the custom began, the answer is simply that people have always known it. You hear of rats summoned before an imaginary court and ordered to leave fields or houses. In parts of Europe, insects and animals were sometimes addressed through formal legal or religious procedures. The practice sounds absurd to modern ears, yet it reflects a serious desire to place chaos within a familiar structure. If rats can be accused, warned, judged, or banished, then perhaps the world remains orderly. Frontier life rarely feels orderly. Weather ruins crops. Illness arrives unseen. Fire can consume years of labour in an hour. A rat chewing through a grain sack becomes one more force that refuses human control. So stories create patterns where life offers none. You notice another custom involving the first rat seen in a new house. If it runs toward the door, some say the household will prosper because trouble is leaving. If it runs inward, hardship is coming. This seems unfair to the rat, which may simply be escaping your boot. Yet signs become powerful because they arrive at moments of uncertainty. A new cabin, a new settlement, a new winter, all invite questions that no one can answer. The direction of a frightened animal suddenly appears meaningful. The visitor beside your fire tells you never to count rats aloud. Counting them apparently encourages them to multiply. You ask how anyone can measure an infestation without counting. The visitor says this is precisely why counting is dangerous. You decide not to pursue the logic. Outside, the wind fades, the lamp flame steadies. Beneath the floor, the scratching resumes in a slow circle around the hearth. You know the creatures are searching for crumbs. You also know that tomorrow someone will interpret the pattern as a sign of rain. The cabin contains practical labour, animal behaviour, inherited fear, and imagination all at once. None fully replaces the others. You seal holes while carrying charms. You set traps while remembering omens. You laugh at stories, then listen more carefully when the wall scratches at midnight. And as the fire sinks into a red glow, the hidden movement below your feet feels both ordinary and ancient. A simple animal searching for food and a shadow carrying every meaning people have ever placed upon it. The red glow beneath the ashes fades, and for a while the cabin seems unusually calm. No scratching circles the hearth. No claws cross the rafters. Even the cats sleep without lifting their heads. You remember the visitor's warning about silence and decide very firmly not to give it meaning. Outside, rain begins. It falls softly at first, tapping the roof in scattered drops. Then the sound thickens. Water runs from the eaves, strikes the packed earth, and gathers against the lowest logs. Wind pushes through the forest, bending branches and driving damp air through every crack in the wall. You rise to check the door. The night smells of mud, wet leaves, and cold timber. Beyond the threshold, the clearing has vanished into darkness. Water shines where the lamplight reaches the ground. Something moves near the woodpile. At first, you see only a low ripple through the shadows. Then one rat crosses the doorway, followed by another. They rush along the outer wall and disappear beneath the cabin. The rain has flooded a burrow. You close the door and press a strip of cloth into the gap beneath it. Behind you, the grey hunting cat wakes. Its ears point toward the floor. Your broad-faced cat raises its head from the hearth and stares at the wall. Both animals become still in the same instant. Then the cabin erupts. A rat bursts from beneath the chest and races across the table. Another drops from a roof beam into the hanging herbs. Two more scramble from the woodpile, colliding before separating in opposite directions. The children wake at once. One cries out. Another sits upright, tangled in a blanket. The youngest announces with remarkable calm that the flower ghost has returned. You lift the lamp higher. Movement spreads along every edge of the room. Rats squeeze from wall cracks, chimney gaps, and spaces beneath the floorboards. Some are small and quick. Others are heavy, wet, and frantic. Their fur clings darkly to their bodies. This is no ordinary nightly search for crumbs. Weather, hunger, disturbed nests, and rising water have driven them into the open. Heavy rain and flooding can force burrowing rodents from underground shelters, sending them toward higher and drier structures. Cabins, barns, lofts, and storage platforms suddenly become refuges. The animals are not arriving in a coordinated army, though it feels that way when several appear at once. You grab the broom. One rat runs along the wall toward the bed. You strike the floor in front of it, turning it aside. Another leaps from the table to a barrel lid. The grey cat springs, catches only air, and crashes into a stool. The stool overturns. A cup rolls beneath the bed. The broad-faced cat launches from the hearth with unexpected speed and pins a rat near the door. For one glorious moment, it appears ready to redeem its entire reputation. Then, another rat crosses behind it. The cat releases the first and pursues the second. Both escape. You herd the children onto the bed and tell them to keep their feet beneath the blankets. This instruction would be more reassuring if rats could not climb bedposts. The oldest child holds a wooden spoon like a sword. The youngest begins counting. You tell them to stop immediately, remembering the warning that counting encourages multiplication. This is not rational, but the night has passed beyond the point where rational pride is useful. A section of chinking falls from the wall. 3 rats emerge through the opening. They have probably been sheltering in the hollow space between logs, but the storm has disturbed their route. One pauses in the lamplight, whiskers trembling, then leaps onto a shelf. A crock rocks beneath its weight. You lunge forward and catch the crock before it falls. The rat jumps to your shoulder. Its claws catch briefly in your shirt. You feel wet fur, sharp toes, and the flick of a tail against your neck. Then it launches toward the table and vanishes behind the meal chest. You stand frozen. The children stare. You decide not to discuss what just happened. One strange bit of animal lore claims that a rat running over a person transfers unusual luck, although traditions disagree on whether the luck is good or dreadful. At this moment, you would gladly trade all possible fortune for a cabin with smoother walls. The rain pounds harder. Water pushes beneath the door despite the cloth. The floor grows slick near the threshold. Outside, the flooded ground prevents the rats from returning to their usual burrows. Inside, every dry corner is contested. You move the food first. The meal chest is dragged toward the center of the room. Covered crocks go onto the table. Hanging meat is raised closer to the rafters, though rats already occupy the rafters. The remaining bread disappears into an iron pot with a weighted lid. The cats chase movement beneath the furniture. The children shout warnings from the bed. You swing the broom until your arms ache. It is difficult to know how many animals are present because each one disappears and reappears so quickly. 5 rats may look like 15. 15 may look like an endless river of fur. Panic multiplies movement more effectively than any superstition. Social historians continue to debate how often dramatic infestation stories reflect genuine mass appearances and how often later memory enlarges a chaotic night. Storms, harvest disturbances, building repairs, and fires can certainly displace large numbers of rodents. Yet vivid family tales often grow with every retelling. This night requires no exaggeration. A rat enters the wooden trap. The falling door snaps shut. For half a breath you feel triumph. Then the trapped animal throws itself against the box, rattling it across the floor. The noise alarms the others, which scatter through the room in a sudden wave. One runs across the hearthstones. Its damp fur smokes near the coals. It veers away, knocking ash into the air. The cabin fills with a grey cloud. Everyone coughs. The lamp flame trembles. For one dangerous moment, you imagine it going out. You shield the light with your hand and move it onto the higher shelf. Darkness would turn confusion into terror. The small flame becomes the centre of the household, illuminating wet backs, bright eyes, and shadows racing far larger than the animals themselves. The storm begins to weaken near midnight. Rain softens from pounding to steady tapping. Water beneath the door stops advancing. The rats remain active, but some retreat into the walls. Others climb toward the roof, following dry passages above the room. The cats finally catch 2. The stone trap falls with a heavy crack near the hearth. The box trap continues rattling. Gradually the open floor clears. You do not relax. You stand with the broom raised, listening for another rush. The children remain crowded together on the bed. The oldest still grips the spoon. The youngest has fallen asleep against the wall, apparently deciding that even an invasion is less powerful than exhaustion. Near dawn, the rain ends. Water drips from the eaves. The cabin smells of wet fur, ash, mud, fear, and overturned supper. Grain lies scattered beneath the shelf. A cloth hangs from the rafters where a rat dragged it. Fresh holes mark the wall. The broad-faced cat sits beside the hearth, chest lifted proudly, as though everything happened according to plan. You lower the broom. The worst has passed, but the room looks changed. The infestation has revealed every weakness at once, every hidden colony, every route between earth, wall, roof, and food. You thought you were living with a few rats. Tonight, the cabin showed you the population behind the scratching. Morning enters through the damaged wall in pale strips, touching the scattered grain. the overturned stool, and the broom still resting against your leg. You move slowly at first. The storm has passed, but the cabin seems to hold its breath after the confusion. Water drips beyond the door. The children sleep in a tangled heap across the bed. One cat lies beside the cold hearth, exhausted by its own heroic interpretation of events. The other watches the trapped rat with unwavering attention. You begin with the floor. Every spilled kernel is gathered. Every damp scrap is removed. Ash is swept from the hearthstones. Mud is scraped from the threshold, and the fallen cloth is pulled down from the rafters. The work feels familiar, yet something has shifted. Until now, you have responded to each problem separately. A hole appears, so you fill it. A sack is chewed, so you patch it. A rat crosses the room, so you set a trap. The storm has shown you that isolated repairs are not enough. The cabin, barn, smokehouse, yard, and food stores form one connected system. A weakness in one place feeds trouble everywhere else. You carry the damaged sacks outside and inspect them in daylight. Thin cloth has no chance against persistent teeth. From now on, grain must remain inside barrels, heavy chests, covered crocks, or containers raised beyond easy reach. This change requires discipline. A lid must be replaced every time. A spoonful of meal cannot remain on the table because you're tired. A handful of beans cannot wait until morning. Rats benefit from the single moment when a household breaks its own rules. Many settled families gradually improved their first cabins as time, tools, and resources allowed. Floors became tighter. Roofs were repaired. Doors received better hinges and thresholds. Separate storage buildings reduced crowding inside the living room. Frontier shelter was often a process rather than one completed act of construction. Your cabin now enters that process. You remove the loose chinking from the storm-damaged wall. The opening is wider than expected, revealing a polished passage between the logs. Fur clings to one edge. Stolen straw fills a pocket deeper inside. Instead of pressing mud over the visible gap, you clean the entire channel. Small stones go into the deepest spaces. Thin pieces of wood reinforce the opening. Fresh clay seals the surface. The repair is slower, but it leaves less hidden room. At the door, you replace the damp cloth with a fitted wooden strip. It does not close the gap perfectly, though it narrows the entrance enough to discourage casual visitors. A sheet of metal would protect the lower edge better, but metal is valuable and difficult to obtain. You work with what the frontier gives you. That principle shapes nearly every improvement. Smooth containers are chosen over rough baskets. Firewood is stacked farther from the wall. Food shelves are moved away from rafters that serve as bridges. Tree branches touching the roof are cut back. Waste is carried farther from the cabin. The water bucket receives a cover that stays attached by cord, making it harder to misplace. None of these measures defeats rats alone. Together they make the household less convenient. An uncommon piece of rural advice recommends placing bells on food chest lids, so any nocturnal visitor announces itself. The method may not prevent theft, but it offers the satisfaction of being awakened at the exact moment your supper disappears. You attach a small piece of metal to one lid anyway. It gives a faint clink when raised. The children find this delightful. You explain that it is not a toy. They test it 6 times. Habits must extend beyond storage. Meals are prepared with fewer scraps left behind. Bowls are cleaned before sleep. Clothing is hung rather than dropped. Bedding is shaken outdoors. Feed in the barn is swept each evening. Traps are checked regularly and moved along known routes. The cats receive less food near the hearth, encouraging them to remember their professional duties. The broad-faced cat expresses deep concern about this policy. Those who study frontier households still disagree about how much cleanliness reflected personal preference and how much depended on available water, fuel, soap, storage, and labor. Advice can make good order sound simple. In reality, Every cleaned surface requires time taken from planting, repairs, childcare, cooking, or rest. You understand the cost. A tighter routine protects food, but it also lengthens the day. When your back aches and the fire is low, sweeping beneath the table feels less urgent. When rain begins, carrying scraps away from the cabin seems unreasonable. Yet one neglected night can reopen the invitation. You teach the children new tasks. The oldest checks the grain lids, another sweeps beneath the table. The youngest is responsible for announcing any uncovered food, a role accepted with such enthusiasm that everyone is reported repeatedly. The household begins to move with a different rhythm. Cover, hang, sweep, inspect, repair. The actions become automatic, woven into cooking and sleep rather than treated as special emergencies. The rat population does not vanish. At dusk, you still hear scratching beneath the floor. A small animal crosses the barn wall. One trap closes during the night. The cats continue staring into corners with occasional success. Total victory was never likely. Rats breed quickly when food and shelter are plentiful. A single surviving group can rebuild its numbers. New animals arrive from fields, woodpiles, wagons, barns, and neighbouring structures. The frontier landscape offers endless movement. The goal changes from elimination to control. You protect the larger stores, you reduce nesting places, you notice signs earlier, you keep the population from becoming bold enough to take over the room again. This is not the triumph sung about in heroic tales. No monument will celebrate your repaired barrel lid. No portrait will show you sweeping crumbs before bed. Yet survival often depends on these quiet acts more than dramatic courage. Weeks pass. The cabin begins to feel different. The walls remain rough, but fewer drafts move through them. Food stores stand in cleaner order. The floor smells less of old grain and damp straw. Night sounds continue, though they are scattered now rather than constant. You sleep longer before waking. One evening, you sit beside the hearth while the children whisper beneath their blankets. The cats rest near the wall, ears turning whenever something shifts beyond the clay. A faint clink comes from the food chest. You look up. The lid has moved only slightly. A rat has tested it and found the weight too great. Claws scrape once along the side, then retreat. You do not leap from your stool. You do not swing the broom. You simply rise, check the lid, and scatter a little ash along the wall to reveal the root by morning. Living more carefully has not made the cabin invulnerable. It has made you observant. You have learned where trouble begins, how small neglect becomes a large loss, and when action matters most. The rats remain near, they always may, but the household now moves with greater patience than panic, and the night no longer belongs entirely to the creatures behind the walls. Morning comes quietly enough that you do not notice it at first. The cabin remains dim, the hearth giving only a dull red glow beneath its ash. The children sleep beneath their blankets. The cats rest near the wall, each arranged in a loose curl, though one ear turns toward every small sound. Beyond the shutters, a bird begins calling from the forest. Its notes enter through the repaired gaps between the logs, delicate and clear. Another bird answers farther away. The darkness at the door changes from black to grey, and the familiar room slowly gathers around you. The table appears first, then the barrels, then the clay-patched walls, the hanging herbs, the weighted lids, and the broom resting within easy reach. You lie still and listen. No claws cross the rafters. Nothing gnaws beside the bed. There is only one faint rustle beneath the floor, followed by silence. The cabin is not free of rats. You understand that now. One may be waiting behind the chest. Another may have moved into the barn during the night. A hidden nest may remain somewhere inside the wall, lined with straw and a piece of cloth you have not yet noticed missing. Still, this morning feels quieter. You rise and place your feet on the floor. The boards are cool but not painfully cold. Spring air carries the smell of damp soil through the doorway. Smoke, wool, clay, and stored grain still shape the room, yet the sour musk that once gathered in every corner has faded. You stir the ashes and find a living coal. Thin bark catches first, then twigs begin to glow. A small flame opens, soft and gold, touching the iron pot and the edge of the table. Daily life in a frontier cabin begins early because daylight is useful, fuel is precious, and work waits in every direction. Fires must be revived, water carried, animals fed, meals prepared, and tools gathered before the larger tasks of the day can begin. There's little room for lying awake while considering whether morning feels emotionally convenient. You set the water pot over the flame. The sound of heating iron joins the birds outside. One child turns beneath a blanket but does not wake. The youngest has one hand open beside the pillow, fingers relaxed. You notice the absence of fear in that small gesture. Weeks ago, every scratch caused blankets to tighten and feet to lift from the floor. Now the household understands the noises. A sound beneath the hearth means something different from a rush across the table. A single squeak is not the same as the frantic chorus that filled the storm night. Knowledge has not removed the animals, but it has given shape to uncertainty. You step outside with the bucket. Mist lies low across the clearing. Drops cling to the grass and shine when the first sunlight reaches them. The barn stands dark beyond the yard, its roof damp from the night. Chickens begin stirring in the coop, producing the soft complaints of creatures who believe breakfast should have happened already. Near the cabin wall, the ash you scattered last evening shows a narrow trail of prints. One rat approached the food chest. It followed the wall, paused near the door, and returned through a gap beside the hearth foundation. The marks are clear enough to read like a sentence. You know where to place the next trap. Once these tracks would have felt like proof of failure. Now they are information. You've stopped expecting the natural world to obey a single repair, a single trap, or one especially stern conversation. You carry water from the spring and return as sunlight begins touching the highest branches. The children wake to the smell of warm meal. Blankets fold back. Boots are shaken before being worn. One child checks the grain lid without being reminded. Another sweeps a few crumbs into the fire. The youngest looks beneath the bed and reports that no flower ghost is present. This is accepted as excellent news. A curious scrap of frontier humour suggests that a quiet cabin means either the traps have worked or the rats have found better food elsewhere. The second possibility is less flattering, but probably just as common. Rodents follow opportunity. When your home becomes difficult, another barn, wagon, storehouse, or poorly covered barrel may offer easier rewards. You almost feel sorry for the neighbours. Almost. Breakfast is plain, warm, and sufficient. You eat slowly beside the open door. Steam rises from the bowls. The cats receive a modest portion and immediately behave as though starvation has arrived. Outside, the settlement is waking. An axe strikes wood in the distance. A wagon creaks somewhere beyond the trees. Smoke rises above another cabin, pale against the morning sky. Every household begins its own rhythm of feeding, sweeping, repairing, planting, and enduring. Researchers still differ over whether later frontier memories portray hardship accurately or shape it into a useful story of toughness and progress. Some recollections soften discomfort with humour. Others enlarge every storm, winter, and infestation. Everyday irritation is difficult to recover because people rarely record each interrupted meal, chewed sack, or sleepless hour. Yet these small troubles matter. Living with rats changes where you place your food. It changes how you build. It changes when you sweep, how you sleep, and what sounds wake you. It teaches children caution. It creates arguments, remedies, jokes, and stories. It reveals how little distance exists between human shelter and the wild world beyond it. The cabin may appear to mark a clear boundary. Inside is home, outside is forest. But the rats have shown you that boundaries are negotiated every night. Wind enters through clay, smoke escapes beneath the roof, seeds arrive on boots, insects hide in bedding, animals follow warmth through cracks. You do not stand apart from the environment. You live inside it, shaping it while it shapes you. After breakfast, you inspect the repaired wall. The clay has dried firm. The door strip remains in place. The food chest gives its little metal clink when opened, causing the children to laugh. You refill the meal bowl and replace the weighted lid. The gesture is simple. It contains months of learning. You remember the first evening when a scratch inside the wall made you freeze beside the table. You remember dust falling from the rafters, the damaged sack, the tug on the blanket, the failed traps, and the winter nights when the room seemed alive around you. You remember the storm most clearly. Wet rats pouring from hidden spaces, children gathered on the bed, cats crashing through stools, ash filling the air, the lamp held high against darkness. That night revealed how fragile the cabin could be, but it also revealed how much the household could endure. Panic became action, damage became repair, fear became routine. This is the quieter truth of frontier resilience. It is not fearlessness. It is getting up after a sleepless night and cleaning the floor. It is carrying water when your arms ache. It is saving the unspoiled grain. It is repairing the same wall again, this time more carefully. You step into the yard as the sun clears the trees. The clearing glows green and gold. Water drips from the roof in a slow rhythm. The barn door opens, and warm animal breath meets the morning air. Somewhere beneath the coop, a rat shifts through straw, still part of the homestead, still looking for its next easy meal. You hear it and continue walking. The day contains too much work to grant every rat a ceremony. Behind you, the cabin stands at the forest's edge, rough, repaired, smoky, and alive. It is not perfectly sealed. It is not perfectly clean. It is not safe from every hunger waiting outside. But it is home. And for this morning, the grain is covered. The children are warm. The fire is burning and the walls are quiet enough. The sunlight grows softer now, and the sounds of the homestead begin to drift farther apart. The axe in the distance becomes slower. The chickens settle into the warm dust. The leaves above the cabin move gently, whispering against one another as the breeze passes through them. You no longer need to watch every crack. You no longer need to hold the broom. The barrels stand closed. The door rests securely in its frame. The fire breathes with a quiet orange glow, and the cabin gathers its familiar warmth around you. Perhaps there is still a rat beneath the floor. Perhaps one small creature waits behind the wall, listening as carefully to you as you once listened to it. But tonight there is room for both the sound and the silence that follows. You settle beneath the blanket. The wool feels warmer now. The mattress gives its soft rustle, and the old timbers release a gentle sigh as the air cools. Outside, the forest continues without hurry. Branches sway. Water moves over stones. A night bird calls once, then rests. Your breathing begins to match the low rhythm of the fire. In slowly, out softly. The long days of carrying, sweeping, guarding, and repairing drift away from you. The storm has passed. The grain is safe for now. Morning will bring work again, but morning is not here yet. For this moment, you are sheltered. You are warm. You have done enough. Let the cabin fade into darkness around you. Let the forest become only a distant murmur. Let every small scratch soften into rain, every creak become wind, and every worried thought settle gently beneath the floorboards. Your eyes grow heavy, the fire lowers, the room becomes still. And in the quietest whisper, the frontier night carries you peacefully into sleep. Sweet dreams.